Thank you. Well, the first thing is we're speaking in a vacuum because we've no report before us, but I welcome the opportunity to make a brief contribution in relation to this. It's an extraordinary week. Yesterday we had the report of SideServe discussed here, and we saw what went on between the two angels, the IBRC and the Mr. O'Brien, and in between we had really the villains and how they were just allowed to do exactly what they wanted. Here we're looking at mBord Pleanála a week after the first judge in charge of the planning tribunal was buried last week. And remember what he said in relation to the planning, that the Mahon Tribunal, a tribunal of inquiry into certain planning matters, final report. Given the existence of such rampant public corruption, the obvious question is why it was allowed to continue unabated. The short answer to that question is that it continued because nobody was prepared to stop it. That is perhaps inevitable when corruption ceases to become an isolated event and becomes so entrenched that it is transformed into an acknowledged way of doing business. I could quote more, but I won't. I've only 4 minutes. We had the Moriarty Tribunal. We had the Office of the Planning Regulator directly arising from that. And then this week we've seen SideServe, and now we're looking at mBord Pleanála. I'll make no comments to prejudice any inquiry. But the most serious questions have to be asked here by government that allowed a process to continue without an analysis, without the institution being able to analyse itself and come back. Suddenly we have an announcement of 24 staff, I think, is it? Begs the question, how is the board supposed to function? I'm going to ignore the allegations for the moment and leave them to one side and look at processes and procedures. How is it supposed to function if suddenly we can give 24 staff? How is it functioning in terms of conflicts of interest if there was nobody monitoring that? Did we look at what SIPO has told us over and over and over that each government has ignored? SIPO 2009, its annual report, it recommends that the Department of Finance should draft new legislation to be based on best practice for dealing with conflicts of interest. Fast forward every single year, 21, the annual report. For a number of years, the SIPO Commission has called for a comprehensive review of the existing ethics framework and so on and so on, absolutely ignored. Finally, the Programme for Government 2021 begins something, but the review has not been seen to date. And then we have a myth of judicial reviews being the cause of everything, and nobody bothers to read anything. But if you read the planning regulator's report, he tells us that judicial reviews are a minute part of the problem. And yet we have the myth being perpetuated by many TDs on all sides that adds to this myth that we're in trouble because of judicial reviews, when on many occasions judicial review was the only option and the most reluctant option taken by people on the ground. They have done us a favour in an awful lot of places. Finally, the strategic housing development, which we have abandoned now, thanks be to God, but not really, because we've given a number of years to phase it out. Let me just quote what the Chief Planner in Galway said into the review on strategic housing. She said she highlighted the strain put on the Department of Planning in Galway. The statistical success of the strategic housing development process is benchmarked against mBord Pleanála's ability to meet their deadlines, but it hides all the pressure and time required at local level. It was a flawed attempt, she said, to deliver social housing. We brought this problem on ourselves, government after government, and particularly with strategic housing developments that bypass the local authority. I'll stop there. I think I'm out of time, am I?
You are, but do we have Deputy Collins?
It doesn't look like we have.
We're ahead of time.
So thank you. So I'll finish in the last 30 seconds. I'm really, really concerned at the undermining of local democracy on a continuous basis. The strategic housing development was just the final straw in undermining local authorities, depleting them of staff, allowing staff to be moved all of the time when they've acquired skill, and suddenly they're moved. We removed the Waste Management Act, no power at all in relation to waste management. We've left the local authorities bereft of power, bereft of resources, and we have managers in place that have corporatised according to government policy, as opposed to having people that serve the communities.
Thank you, Deputy.